Hello and welcome. The goal of this video is to get you introduced to Lightroom. If you've heard of it, if you've seen it in different places, but you have never set it up, the goal of this video is to get you to use Lightroom to do the basic setup, to start importing your photos, to start cataloging your photos, and to start the basic edits of your photo, and eventually get some processed photos exported out of your Lightroom and print some photos as well. So take this as a introduction to people who are primarily into photography and they want to get some photo management out of their Lightroom software and to get some basic editing skills. So this should help you get the basics done, and after that you can learn more and more from a lot of various creators on how to edit your photos in a different way. So to begin with, I've noted everything down in this presentation, and within this presentation you'll see a bit of agenda and overview on what we're going to cover. So I'm going to start with an introduction to Lightroom, and from there we'll set up and start with a brand new catalog. And within that new catalog, we'll import some photos. We'll look at few different ways of organizing the photos, and from there we'll get into some basic editing done within Lightroom. Once you've done some basic editing, we'll try and create those edits into a preset, and also we'll use some built-in or imported or other presets that are already in the Lightroom. We'll also look at some editing tools which are different from the basic editing. Basic editing will cover the light, the color, and then how dark or light or color scheme does your photo follows. And the editing tools are basically smaller changes that you can do on your photos, like removing a bit of distraction, changing the crop, and then straightening your photos. And so from that point, once you've done basic editing and basic tools usage, you can export your photos out for putting into photo competitions, sharing on social media, and we'll cover that. And we'll also see the print module in there. Once we've covered all of that, I'll talk you through the summary of what we have covered. And during this whole thing, I might drop a few tips for people who have been using Lightroom already. They know most of this already, so just so that you get something good out of it, even if you've already are aware of Lightroom and the intro to it, what I'll do is I'll drop some tips in during the course of each section, or I will introduce them towards the end. Okay, and on when I'm delivering this lecture live, I usually open the floor up for a QA session. But since this is a recorded video, you're more than welcome to drop any questions in the comment section. So jumping right into it. So if we have a look at the start, introduction to Lightroom. What is Lightroom? So almost all of us are aware of Adobe Photoshop, which has been Adobe's primary software for photo editing, and it is used to manipulate the photo in certain ways to basically do everything that you could have done as an manual photo processor. In a dark room, you would touch up the photos, change, remove a bit of blemishes or any odd marks here and there. So similarly, when we talk about the digital photos, Photoshop lets you do all those editing and minor adjustments to your photos. But over the year, it has become so advanced that it lets you do way more than basic editing. In a similar fashion, Adobe also introduced the Photoshop Lightroom. So this was an extension to Photoshop itself. It lets you import all your photo files in one place rather than having them in just the Windows folders or your MacBooks folders, and not have an easier way to catalog them, mark them with keywords, or quickly access them. In Lightroom, it lets you organize it in way better fashion. In addition, what else Lightroom does is that it gives you ability to develop the photos. It gives you ability to edit and enhance images. It gives you a few panels like navigation through the photos, looking at the histogram of the photo, and changing the basic settings of the photos, as well as it gives you a full toolbar which lets you adjust photos and make minor adjustments to it. All in all, it basically is your first step when you're serious about your photography, you're trying to edit photos and manage them. This is your first stop where you'll import your photos, and from here you can take your photos out to Photoshop or other editing softwares. In terms of versions, we've got two different versions available. One of them is called Lightroom Classic. This is the one that Adobe came out a number of years ago and has been very popular among the photographers across the globe. And more recently, they have come out with the cloud-based version, and they called it Lightroom. It is gaining a bit of popularity, but it lacks with a lot of features that Lightroom Classic has. So our focus will be mainly on Lightroom Classic for this session. So jumping right into it, when you open up Lightroom, and if you do not have a catalog already, in this case I do have a catalog already, so I can't show you that screen for the very first time. But if you do not have a catalog, you'll be presented with two options. One is to open a catalog, and the other one is to create a catalog. So for the purpose of this exercise, I've pressed create a new catalog. So what I'm gonna do is in my sample folder here, I'm gonna just give this catalog a new name. I'll call it intro 3 and I'll press create. So what this will do is it'll ask me a few options, whether if I want to back up the catalog regularly, or this is totally up to you. You can back it up or you can skip this time and then come back to the catalog itself. So I'll let it take a few moments to load up once the catalog is created. So while this is loading, what I'll do is I'll move forward to one of the slides to see where we're starting with. Okay, let's get back to the Lightroom. Okay, so this is basically the Lightroom interface. This is the layout that you'll see once you open a brand new catalog. I'm gonna let it load fully so that I can explain the parts of it. So the Lightroom has loaded, and once it has loaded, we can see a few sections in this, a few parts on this interface. What I'll do is in this empty scenario, I'll talk about some of this so you are aware of it, and especially if you ever accidentally hide one of these, how to get these back on your screen. So first off, you see we are landed in the library module. So these are basically your core modules that you're going to work with. For the purpose of this introduction, we're gonna cover library, we're gonna cover develop, and we're gonna skip over map, book, slideshow. We might look at the print. Yeah, we'll look at the print quickly, but basically your focus as a beginner would be in library and develop. So that's what's called your module. So currently you are in the library module. You can click to go to develop module, and you can see what happens is the options on the right side change. But if you go back to library, these are the core options you get in your library, but this base panel stays the same. This one mostly stays the same. Some options change, but we'll explore more of them once we've loaded some photos in. One thing to note is within this middle section, this is where your photos will appear, and just on top of that, you'll always see this filter bar. You can filter your images by various options, which I'll show you in a minute. On the left hand side, this is called a navigator. This allows you to go through parts of the image and look at it. And I think at this stage, what I'll do is I'll import some photos so it'll make it easier for us to visualize how each of these options work. So when you're importing any photos, one thing to understand is you've got various options to import photos. First option that you've got available is called copy as DNG. DNG stands for digital negative. What this option will do is it'll import all your photos that you select, but save them as a DNG raw file. The second option is your selection will be copied over to your target folder. On the left hand side, it always shows you your source where you're picking the files from, and on the right hand side it shows you where the files will be going, and there are some other options you can select as you import them. The third option is move. This option is not available if you choose your source to be an SD card. It's only available if you've got files sitting in a folder somewhere. So in this example, we've got introduction to Lightroom. I've got some photos sitting here already. So what I'll do is I'll leave these selected. So I do have an option to move in this case because I'm selecting photos not from an SD card but a hard drive. Last option is add. What add does is it leaves the photo exactly where they are, and then it just adds the information about those. So those are your four basic options when you're importing. So next part you need to understand when you're importing photos is you've got two options. You've got the option to import all the photos or any photos that are new, the photos that you haven't imported before. I can demonstrate that by selecting some photos now to import them, and then we'll see that those won't be shown anymore. Other than that, things that you can do here is you can look at individual file one by one, and then check them one by one before you import them, or you can also click this to check all photos or uncheck all photos. You also have got the option to click one photo, select the last one, and when you've selected a bunch of photos, you can check one of them, it will check all of the selected photos. And you don't have to do that with a series, you can do that on different randomly picked files as well. In this case, what I did was held the control button and then I clicked the ones that I wanted to import. So when I click this, it will click all of these. Okay. So there are various ways of doing that. The other thing to note here is you can sort these by file name, you can sort these by capture time, and you can sort these by capture time A to Z. So earliest captured images will be at the beginning, and the latest one will be at the end. On the right hand side, this part is quite important. So when we are adding these photos to Lightroom, all of these, or rather most of these, are basically our raw files. They won't have any preview for us to view that at any time. So what we will have is we'll have to build a preview of that. Your camera does a job of showing you a preview, especially if you're saving JPEG and RAW file, it'll try to show you the JPEG version of it. But when you're in Lightroom, you're bringing only the raw file. You'll have to create a preview that you can use to look through your catalog and process images. So there are a few options. The first option is minimal. This one imports the files really quickly, but it'll take longer time every time you're trying to look at your images. And then you've got embedded and sidecar. So this one is where it uses the preview from the raw file, the embedded preview from the raw file. It'll use that, and it'll also use create the previews just big enough for the bottom part of the Lightroom. If you remember, in the interface we had a film reel at the bottom which is called the sidecar. So that one, those previews will only be built. I would recommend at least going for standard. What it does is it builds the previews which are standard size, not too big, not high resolution, but still it's a good medium selection to build these previews. You can always click one to one. What it'll do is it'll create previews exactly the same size as the raw file in terms of resolution, but it will take a lot of time and a lot of space. I usually leave it at standard, and you can always do build smart previews. What build smart previews does is it creates the previews only for editing. Whatever editing you do, it'll try to use that efficiently, and all the changes when you apply, they'll be applied to the raw file in a smart way. Okay, so those are the basic collection. Those are the basic options you can select over here. The next thing that we've got in here is something called collection. Now this I find very useful. I personally have created a system for myself that I uh, keep all my images, all my photos in specific genres. Say, for example, if I'm uh, doing portraits, so I'll keep all of them in a collection called portraits. So if I click that and create portraits, and just to make sure that I'm picking the right ones, what I'll do is I'll uncheck all the photos. I'll select I'll select all the portraits. I'll click to check one of them once all of them are selected. Now to check my standard, my previews are on standard, they are on smart previews. We are not importing any duplicates, and collection is set to portrait. Okay, and I'm using the add option, so the files won't be copied, they'll stay where they are, and they'll just be added into this catalog. After that, what I'll do is I'll click import. So what happens after this step is I'll see all of the images in Lightroom in this catalog, and on the left hand side I can see my collections are showing portraits have got 7 photos which are right here. In catalog it also shows me an option that says all photographs, which shows me my all of my photographs. It also has got previous import that shows me the last import that I've got. In addition, you can also expand this folder section and go and have a look at what your folders are showing. So in this case, I've got all the files sitting in this folder. Okay. Other than this part on the left, the other thing that we wanted to talk about on the left was this navigator. So right now, if we see this image here, I can switch from grid view to loop view. So grid view, you can see there's a letter shown in front of it, G, which means if I ever press G, I'll go to this view. If I ever press E, I'll go to loop view, which is an individual image. So I'll do that. So I can see this image now. It's obviously a blurred image, focus off, but for the purpose of this exercise, the image is right here. Now, if I change my zoom, which is the default mouse option for me, that I've got this magnifying glass. If I click that, so I've zoomed into this image. So I can see right over here on left, you can see this is showing me what part of image is being zoomed. So I can click anywhere to see various parts of the image. So that's your navigator. So it allows you to jump in the image in the right place. You can always click fit to fit this whole image in one screen, or you can click 100% to show it at 100%, or you can click 200% if you're actually pixel peeping any image. Okay, so that's basic coverage of these option at the left, this main screen in the middle where we've seen this one here, these two options. So the next thing I want to cover is this bottom part, this side, this reel kind of structure. You can click on any other image to jump to a different image. And when I've clicked this, I can see that again this is another image and the focus is a bit out on this one. And if I click the third one, again I can see focus is a bit out on this one. And the fourth one, we can see the focus is absolutely correct. So if you are trying to do something like this, where you're selecting the correct shot out of four, what I'll suggest is click the first one, hold shift, click the last one, and when you've got a few of them selected, you go to survey view option, which obviously is with the letter N. So if I click that, then you can see all of them like this. So in this scenario, a lot of times you're able to easily check which one is better and which one is not. So in this case, if I've got this and if I click cross on the first one, which I can obviously see is not sharp, and then I get to see rest of them like that. So I can change that to 100 as well to actually see in detail again. Yeah, and you can always jump to the loop view and this view whenever you want to compare images and pixel peep if you want. However, you would have noted that in this at this level, to me all three images have got the eyes at, at proper sharpness. It doesn't show the problem with these first two images. So for this reason, the option that works is the compare view. So if I click compare view, it has taken two images out for that. So what you can do is on the left hand side, if you've selected the left hand side where you can see this white border over here, you can choose an image for the left hand side, and then if you click on the right hand side and choose another image, so now you are comparing image 1 and 3 side by side. And in this situation, when you are zooming into either of image, this lock thing here is allows you to zoom into both of them at the same time. So in this case, you can see, okay, in comparison, neither of them are good. So what you can do is click on the right hand side, pick a different image, and then you can try and decide that that's my right image. The reason I'm showing the comparison and the survey mode is to come to the point about how do you sort out good images from the bad images. You've got a few different methods that you can do. The very first one is this little flag at the bottom of each photo. It's available everywhere in Lightroom. So in here I can say I'm gonna set this one as rejected, and I'm gonna select this one as the pick. So just doing this, what happens is now this one is marked as a rejected flag and this one is marked as a picked flag. So if I keep repeating this step, this process, and keep picking my um, my picked and rejected files. So see if this one I don't like it, I reject. That's one way I can sort out my photos in this catalog. So in this case, I've got 4 photos, and now I've given some the rejected flag and a couple of them a picked flag. So this is where you can come right up here and select flagged. What it'll do is it'll give you only the photos that have been flagged. So it'll exclude anything that's not flagged. However, it will also enable this whole filter bar. This filter bar then allows you to change your selection. So in this case, if I say I want to see unflagged, not the flagged ones. So now I can see only the images that have no flag, neither pick nor rejected. Or you can click this and only see the rejected files. So you can toggle through these to pick the right options that you want to see. Okay. The other thing the other way I would suggest some people use is obviously trying to use the star. So if I've got these two images, they are in fact the same image in different version. But if you go into comparison mode for this, and let's say if you're looking through this, one of them is a noise reduction version that's been processed through Lightroom. So let's say I give this one 5 stars. You can come back on this side and give the other one, let's say 4 star. Okay. So again, going back to main library and then clearing out all the filters, which you can always do by clicking this option, filters off. Now you can see you've got some files with the cross flag, some with the picked flag, and then some with given stars. And again, you can use this to filter out what you're looking into. So stars are basically called rating, and then in this case you can see when I've picked rating, it has picked all the rated images. You can also click over here to say only show me 5 star, so it'll limit only the 5 star images. So again, other than flag, you've got rating that allows you to filter out certain images. Let's go back to filters off again. Let's jump here, quickly give this one, let's say I give this 4 star, I give this 5 star, and going back to rated, now I can see, oh, these are my rated images, and then I can go 5 star. So these are my 5 star images. Some people use this in this way that they take a lot of photos and then rate some good ones 4 or 5 stars, and then they use that. Some people use the option of picked images, and then they go for just to show the picked images and then just work on those images. It's totally up to you how you want to use these systems. The third way to identify and use some images, tag some images, is some people like to select the images and tag them with a color. So let's say these three, I don't like them, I don't want them, I can tag them with red. And a couple of images, if I think, oh, I really like this one and this one, I want them to be processed, I can go green on those. These two, I think, oh, maybe, and I can set them color label blue. So this way you can quickly see which photos are rejected, which photos are maybe, and which ones are obviously going ahead. So this is basically your library module that allows you to sort the images, tag the images, and then filter the images as you want. The other part of the filter that I wanted to show was filtering using the metadata that's in the photos. See, in this case, we might not have a lot of variety, but to start with, you can choose by lens. Say in this case, I can say, oh, let me see just the 2470 images. Or you can say, let me just see the 50 prime images. It will be better if we import a bit more images to this catalog for this part. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna choose that as a source again. And as I told you before, that if you set it to new photos, it will only show you photos that are not already in the catalog. If I jump to all photos, it'll show me others as well. Yeah. And this is protected in two ways. The other way is don't import suspected duplicates over here. So, right, in this case, let's see. I can see that, images from here to here are basically, let's say, bridges. So let's say if I want to import them and I want to call them bridges. Okay. So I'll create a collection of mine that is all the bridges that I'm importing. So you can do that and click import. So now my catalog not just have some portraits, it's also got some bridges. And on the left, if you see, we've got bridges and we've got portraits. Yeah. And previously, as we saw, there was a previous import. In the last iteration, we saw it was showing the portraits only. Now it's showing the bridges that we imported. So I'm going to go ahead and import the last set of images as well from the same folder. I select that, and in fact, I'll do in two different times. Okay, so I'll import all of these. I'll create a new collection. I've called it landscape. Okay, and then I press OK and press import. Okay, and lastly, now I know I'll only have about 32 images left, but let's just import them as well. So these are two images, very similar. I'll add them to a connection and I'll call them night. Okay, now we've got our library. By default, it will always go to previous import, but you can always jump to all photographs if you want to look at all photographs, or if you want to look at specific photographs, you can go by collections, or you can just go by all photographs and then filter by metadata that we talked about. So in this case, I've got these 24 photos, but let's say I wanted to just see the photos that were done in June. So you can just click and go like that. Your filter would be date, and your options would be available here that you can change and choose. Okay. So other than date, some easy and good options are like camera. You can choose which camera the photo was taken with. I mean, by chance, all of these have been taken by one single camera, but if there were more, you'll see more of them here. Lens is an interesting one here because we've ended up seeing a variety of lens. So these landscapes were done with a wide lens over here, and then this one was done with the standard lens, and this one was done with a these were done with a prime lens. Not just that, you also can choose what focal length was used, because we do know that couple of lens in here have got variable focal length. So we can see, oh, these are the fully wide 14 mm shots, but these are the 30 mm shots. So you can sort by, looking through this. Um, you can do this exercise. What I do like this exercise for is, let's say if I've got a zoom lens and I want to understand, after buying this zoom lens, do I tend to take more photos on the zoom end or at the wide end? So that'll be a good way of understanding whether your next lens purchase need to be a wider lens or a more zoomed in lens. So in this case, you can see I've taken most of them at the 70 mm, one at 66, none at about 24 or below. So maybe if I was taking a photo, I might have gone even further if the zoom was available. So just another way you can try and use this filter bar for that purpose. So just to quickly show you, the things that you can choose here are date, month, day, file type, flags that have been set, rating that we talked about, some of the things that we haven't talked about, but they'll come later, like exported or not exported. But basically, in terms of core information that's in files EXIF, like camera setting, lens, shutter speed, aperture, ISO speed, you can always choose ISO speed, things like that, to understand which ISO is giving you a better result over the other. So that's one of a good one that you can try and use. You can try and compare two different images based on, different ISOs. You've got flash state that's in there, GPS data for cameras that have got GPS enabled, and then map location. Other than that, you've got a few other things that you can, choose from here. Okay. Some of these in develop, we'll cover some of them, and then you can use this filter to limit showing the photos that have been applied with those specific filters. Okay, right. So that sort of covers our core library module, the filtering of images, comparison, the survey mode, tagging of images, rating of images, and then flagging of images. So let's go back and quickly check if we have covered everything. We have covered how to import photos. We have covered how to get them from computer, camera, or SD card. We've talked about how you can't move from SD card. You can just copy. We haven't talked into much detail about RAW or JPEG, but that's not part of this lesson. But very quickly, a RAW file would always be a very huge file created by camera of the image as it is. There's no processing done, whereas a JPEG file would be a processed image. In terms of organizing photos, we've talked about photos, importing the photos in collection. We didn't talk about folders because the only option we used in here was um, adding photos rather than copying. We talked about flags, ratings, and color label, but we haven't touched keywords and metadata. And lastly, we've checked the views, and we've covered two more views than that. So let's quickly see the folders, how the folders are managed. So if in in this scenario, we've got all the photos sitting in this single folder called photos, I can always go and right click and create a new folder inside. And before I do that, what I can do is I can select photos I want in there. So what I'm going to do is collect all the portraits, right click, create a folder and call it portraits. Okay, and it gives me an option straight away, include selected photos. I click create, and what will happen is a folder will be created, and these portraits will now reside within this subfolder. So you can basically create your own structure on how you want to manage these photos. For some selection, I keep them separated in yearly folder. So you can also do something like 2024. I'm not gonna select any photos and create it, and you can always do things like January. Okay, so you can create your own folder structure over here and keep your images in this way. This option is also available when you are importing photos to be done automatically. I'll show you this how um, by but before I do that, what I'll need to do is I'll need to uncheck this. So we select this and we'll select all photos just to demonstrate this. If I've got all the photos over here, and on the right hand side, if we've got on the right hand side, if we've got the destination option available, because we are in the copy, it allows us to say where do I want to put these files into, and I can say that organize them by either original folder into one folder or by date. By date is the one that I was talking about. You can create the monthly and yearly folders automatically. You've got a few different methods. You can do 2024 and then 1103, that signifies today's date, or a full date, or November '03. So there are a few different versions you can do that. It will do is it'll create those folders for each of that image that it is importing. Okay. So that covers how folders are managed within Lightroom. The good thing about this is that this matches uh, the Windows or Mac folders. So if I right click on that and click show in Explorer, it's showing me exactly how I've created those folders. They are exactly right over here. So you can see portraits are no longer in here. In fact, they are sitting in here. Okay. Secondly, if you remember, we talked about JPEG and RAW file. So if I show you this file, if I go into properties, this is the JPEG file of when this photo was taken, and this is a 23 MB for this file. And the same named file for the RAW, if I go into properties, it is almost twice the size, and it is NEF, um, that's Nikon's RAW file format. Okay, so in Lightroom, when you import these files, the default setting is it imports both of them, but shows you one only. So this image 5510 is sitting there, and it is basically a combination of RAW and JPEG. Okay, so both of them are sitting, but it shows you one at a time cleverly. Okay, so basically this covers everything that we said we were going to talk about: importing and organizing photos, and uh, different views and everything. What we will do in the next session is we'll cover the basic editing in Lightroom, and then we'll take it from there. So until then, I'll I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.